Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is Ruby Price, and today we're here to review the final qualifying session of the 2023 F1 season, where Max Verstappen has taken a fourth consecutive pole position in Abu Dhabi. Joining me today, we have Grid Talk co-host Owain Medford.
Hello.
And Formula Talk host Sophia Richmond.
Hi.
Before we get into the episode, we must thank our sponsor for this episode, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts. And also be sure to follow us on our social channels at Grid Talk UK to stay up to date with the show. So it's all coming down to the final race with battles for the best of the rest, battle for the wooden spoon, and two Spaniards on the same amount of points. And a rather mixed up grid with two big names out before we even got to qualify, the final part of qualifying, I should specify. Owain, let's start with Williams, who gave Logan Sargent plenty of opportunities to get it right and had his flying laps deleted for track limit infringements twice, so he didn't even set a time. His teammate Albon qualified P14. How disappointed would you be if you were Williams, and can they make an impact starting where they are on Sunday?
Quite disappointing, to put it mildly. This is a track that sort of should suit the Williams, and really they need it's still all up to play for, really. Down where they are in the championship, and that's really what they've got to be thinking about. I mean, obviously they're not in the points positions right now, but neither are any of their competitors, I don't believe, apart from Sonoda. No, actually, and Hulkenberg. You know what? You know what? It is quite difficult now. As it stands, it's not. They're not losing their position just yet, but Sargent being outside the of turn one, I believe it was, on both occasions. It honestly looks amateurish, really, and he's had a full season now. It shouldn't be. It's the sort of thing that makes it so much harder. And given the lap time that he was doing prior to that, he actually probably would have got into Q2 and been able to mix it up with his teammate Albon again. Characteristically poor, really, from what we've seen in the last few races. So it all made their life difficult. But one thing about the Williams is they're running a bit more downforce this weekend. But you'd think with the sort of aerodynamic efficiency of the car and Abu Dhabi's quite long straights, there would be the ability for them to pass, which and probably stay ahead, which could win out for them. But currently, it's looking a little bit precarious.
It certainly is, and as I believe the only driver to not actually have a contract for 2024, Sargent, this weekend is his last chance to properly impress and stick around in 2024. But Sophia, just ahead of Sargent and only 4 points ahead of their rivals in the constructors, the Alfa Romeo cars have kept their Vegas livery, but seemingly left their qualifying speed back in Sin City. Zhou qualified 19 and Bottas starts P18. With both Haas ahead of them on the grid, will Alfa Romeo be worried about keeping P9, and what can they do tomorrow?
Yeah, they're 4 points ahead of Haas. So, as mentioned, both Haas are ahead of the Alphas. I think this just wasn't their weekend. Even looking at the free practices this weekend, and obviously some of them not not participating in free practice one, and then obviously the disruption into free practice two, there was a lot of unknowns, and there's going to be a lot of unknowns going into the race on Sunday. In all honesty, though, I think 4 points, while that doesn't seem like a lot, it is actually a lot when you think about the teams, because 4 points is literally a quarter of what Haas has had this whole season. So is it possible? Again, race pace as well has been very up and down with the Alfa Romeo. So I think they might get it by the luck of other drivers' race paces dropping down. I think we'll probably talk about some of the other drivers, but I think like for Haas and Williams has mentioned that they are not built for race paces as well. So I think I think they might have it, but I think they're going to be like on the edge of their seats to retain the P9 position. But to be fair, looking at qualifying as well, they had I think Zhou had his first time deleted in Q1, so obviously that put him back and put him in a different strategy as the rest of them. But I don't know what's happened. Both of them were just like um they just weren't even performing as what we expected, like compared to how they were in Vegas. So hopefully it'll be damage limitations coming into tomorrow, and they can maybe scrounge a point. It's unlikely, I think, but as long as they don't have DNFs, and I think if they rely on the other team's race bases dropping, I think they can secure the P9 position.
Yeah, like it's obviously close at the bottom, but it's close by an amount of points that isn't really usually achieved by the teams who are in those bottom four constructor positions. But Owain, a mixed bag for Haas then, who had Kevin Magnussen out in Q1 in P17, but his teammate Hulkenberg managing to qualify P8. We've seen this many times before from them, and they do tend to struggle more on Sundays. But with an opportunity to outscore Alfa Romeo, is there anything they can do to jump off the bottom of the constructors in the final weekend of the season?
Pray that the tire wear doesn't go against them. I mean, we've seen them. The Haas has, obviously been a one lap car almost all season. And Hulkenberg, to be honest, has sort of yet again proved that. Done a pretty good job. Not showing much evolution between the sessions, but he's done I'd like to say he has done a bang up job to get ahead of even some much faster cars, really, like a number of faster cars. We're talking Sainz, we're talking Gasly, we're talking Hamilton, Ocon, both of, but I think, Stroll as well. He's done a really impressive, some really impressive work there, and it puts him in just ahead of sort of what becomes sort of a throng of drivers going through the first sector on the first lap. Then by comparison, we've got Magnussen, and I don't know what his time was initially, but if I'm reading it right, or remembering correctly at least as well, he did have his first lap deleted because of track limits, and then just didn't have the speed. So it's not a case of he was going faster and then was caught out. It was just it was just unfortunate that he lost his first lap time, and that sort of didn't give him the ability to, maybe he was driving a little bit conservatively, but either way, he's something like 3.5 tenths behind his teammate's Q1 time. So it's really not good for him. And he's going to have to hope for something to happen, some kind of tumultuous event that's going to get him further up the grid. Because right now it's, they are going to finish at the bottom of the table, and that's, terrible for them essentially.
Yeah, definitely. Like a team whose, financial circumstances have been prevalent over the last four seasons at the very least. But, they're the ones that really needed the performance to not appear for their rivals. And unfortunately, as will happen when you don't do much developing of your car, people are going to catch you up in the end. But Sophia, let's take a look at just Carlos Sainz for now of the two Scarlet cars, fighting for P4 with Alonso and Norris in the driver's standings. They've both massively outqualified him. Out in P16, citing traffic. Was there any traffic that blocked Carlos on this scenario? But can he make a comeback on race day and secure P4, or is the damage mostly already done?
Oh, I mean, it's crazy to think about. I think it's gonna be a very tough ask for Sainz to maintain P4, especially because the other contenders are so high up on the grid. Obviously, anything could happen. It's Abu Dhabi. It was interesting about the traffic. He had over 40 seconds across the line. So, like, he was blaming traffic in the pit lane. And obviously, we'll talk about that a bit later about the pit lane, the bunching and all that. But then he was also saying that there was traffic because obviously he was on a different strategy as some of the other drivers. So it was when drivers went across to do the cool, they weren't moving as quickly away. However, there's been no records of anybody being notified about the maintaining a minimum time, which we normally do see recently in some of the qualifyings from drivers slowing down too slowly. So I think part of it, I think the strategy, as always, Ferrari was not there. And it was just a bad, like multiple things that kind of came into play. He was 0.2 seconds off from Gasly, which was quite an interesting one as well, because obviously Gasly and Alpine have been kind of the hit or miss. They've been into Q1 knockout quite often. But this is the first time since 2019 Sainz has not been into into Q3. He had a record of the most like Q3 appearances of 83 or something like that, which is absolutely crazy. It was Sao Paulo 2019 was the last time for it. I think he can move up the grid. I think that's very much possible. We've seen it in the Ferrari a little bit. However, do I see him in the points? I don't actually. I think he'll be on the cusp, probably like P11, maybe P10 if we're lucky. But he has a big challenge ahead of him if he wants to get proper points. And also, as well, this hinders the Ferrari battle as well for the constructors with Mercedes. At the moment, they are 4 points behind the Mercedes, and with both Mercedes drivers obviously one a lot higher than the other Mercedes drivers, their gap is a lot smaller as well. So I think this has also put a nail in the coffin for Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship as well in that battle.
Yeah, absolutely. And moving on from AlphaTauri then, Owain, Daniel Ricciardo down in P15, but Yuki Tsunoda with a stunning P6. If he can stay there tomorrow, AlphaTauri would earn enough points to move ahead of Williams if they don't score. How do you see their race going?
I mean, Daniel Ricciardo, I'll just start with him. That really poor performance. Obviously, couldn't improve from one session to the next. He's barely improved by 0.02 of a second. So there's something. I think it's clearly messed up there, or had an issue, because even with track evolution would have accounted for more of an increase in speed than that. Like you say, Yuki Tsunoda really mixing it with the big boys up there in sixth. And depending on the outcome of the Piastri thing, I doubt he'll move position, but that could even that could increase even further. He's in a really good place going into the race. I hope he just sort of keeps his nose clean. If he keeps his nose clean, gets through the first stint without any issues, it could really start to put the pressure on Williams and maybe cause them to slip up. Obviously, you'd like Daniel Ricciardo to be there, but Daniel's a seasoned enough racer that he'll probably keep himself out of trouble. And it's the end of the season. I mean, they have very little to lose. I think they've just got to go for it. It's those kind of scenarios that can maybe lead you into the realms of possibility of overcoming large points differences, and they could really prove me wrong from what I believe I said last week about them.
Yeah, definitely. And from teams who are just outside the top five to a team in need of a 5-star review, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're one of the 72% of people who aren't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider helping us out with a like and a subscribe. And also, just because it is Black Friday weekend or Black Friday month, as far as many emails that I've received seem to imply, go and check out our Redbubble store for, whilst there is discount on Grid Talk merch, you could get yourself a Grid Talk hoodie just in time for the temperatures to get very, very cold, and for a discount as well. But yeah, so Sophia, Aston Martin were looking relatively strong in Q1, but with a close field and struggling in Sector 3, that kept Stroll out of Q3 and ended up in P13. Alonso, trying his best to take P4 in the Drivers' Championship, did qualify P7. With the battle going down to the finest of margins, what can Aston do on Sunday to secure those points?
I mean, Aston last year had both of the drivers into the points, so I think that is potentially a possibility. Obviously, one of them is a retired driver, but with Alonso DNFing last year due to a technical problem, I'm hoping there won't be another technical problem, especially now, obviously, into the Aston. when it came to qualifying as well, they were just quite quiet. You didn't really see them much in terms of coverage. There was no kind of real issues. They didn't cause any impeding. They weren't involved in any impeding. Their strategy seemed to be kind of just spot on. It was just lacking the speed for it. As you mentioned, Sector 3 is where a lot of these drivers were getting caught out on. Most of the drivers were always improving in Sector 1 and Sector 2, but that last sector, most of them never really actually improved in their last time. I think that apart from like one or two of those drivers. Um, for Aston, I think they just need to make sure that both cars' strategies are in line for what they can do. And obviously, tires are coming into play with degradation. I think both of them in points, I think, is definitely possible. It's not, I don't think, unrealistic. When it comes to obviously battling with constructors and other drivers as well, obviously we mentioned Alonso is battling, I believe, in his own kind of standings as well. With just I think they just need to be put their foot down, not make any mistakes, and just have a clean race. I think that's probably the best way to end off the season of Aston Martin, which has the tumultuous highs and lows that we've seen throughout, from thinking that Alonso was going to have a race win and potentially battling the constructors with Red Bull, to then obviously dropping down. I think just having both of the drivers finish the race, both in the points, I think is probably the best way to end the season.
Yeah, a clean weekend, and as long as Alonso outscores Norris by at least, well, as long as Alonso isn't outscored by Norris by at least 5 or 6 points, I think it is, he will retain P4 in the championship, presuming Sainz doesn't catch up as well, obviously. But Owain, then, looking at the Alpines, Gasly lost his final lap in Q3 and stayed 10th. But after strong showings last weekend in Vegas, is it back down to earth for the French team with Esteban Ocon only in P12?
I don't think so, to be honest with you. I think Ocon's done a fairly good job. Apparently, he is under the weather a bit. And I don't know what that accounts for. It's not like fuel where you can work out exactly how much of a lap delta you can get per illness you have. But apparently, he's still coming through with it. And he's only 3 and a bit tenths off his teammate. Going through Q2. So I don't actually really think it's that bad. He'll be directly behind him on the grid. They'll be looking to see what they can do to sort of. I guess they're racing for pride at this point. To be honest with you, there's nothing they can gain points wise in the constructors. It's only down to what they can gain in the drivers. Apart from that, they're just sort of. They'll be looking for a couple of points here and there. You know what? In fact, provide some an entertaining race. They just need to get into battles, get some sponsor time. Show some good value for money from their recent investors. That's really all they've got to do. I mean, it's kind of freeing in that way. So I wouldn't put it past the Alpines to really go for a race win at this point. Just be like, well, we've got nothing else we can do. Let's go for it. They'll have to hope for a lot of other things to go their way on that one, but just send it, have fun. That's what they'll be looking to do in the race tomorrow.
Just get Gasly to take out everyone ahead of him at turn 1, and then Ocon can drive through and fight Lewis Hamilton for P1, with Hamilton being the driver between the two Alpines. And speaking of, the Mercedes driver, Sophia, George Russell looks strong in FP3, and as the Mercedes driver who actually did take part in all 3 of the practice sessions this weekend, he has been the stronger looking Mercedes of the two. Many had him as a contender for pole position. He's ended up in P4, and he did knock out his teammate in Q2, who will be starting P11, as I already mentioned. Did you think Russell could challenge for pole today? And do you think that Mercedes can stay ahead of Ferrari in their fight for P2 in the championship?
I think for sure, and he might actually start a little bit higher up, George, because at the moment I'm not seeing any new news, but Oscar Piastri is currently being investigated for impeding Pierre Gasly during that, so that could have an effect on the standings. Not seeing any news of what decision's been made so far, but looking at the free practices again, George 2 out of the 3 was performing well, and he had the best times going in. Hamilton's saying that there's something wrong with the car. The car's not set up right. Even in his post-race interview, he didn't really give much. It was just, for some reason, the car was just not set up right. And I think George said it very well post-show, where when it comes to F1, the cars can be probably set up the same, but they have different sweet spots, and something just clicks all together, which sometimes they don't even know as drivers how that is even possible. And I think it went more into George's favor this qualifying compared to Lewis. Lewis, this is since 2014. This is the most times. Let me rephrase that. Lewis Hamilton has not been into Q3 for consecutive qualifyings for the first time since 2014. There we go. Took a few chances on that. But which is crazy to think as well. He has had pole for 5 times as well in Abu Dhabi. This is one of his tracks. And for him to be knocked out by his teammate as well, as George was the last driver to come across in Q2 to kind of bump him out and everything. I think Mercedes does have a better advantage compared to Ferrari, obviously, with Sainz starting a little bit lower down, as mentioned. I think they have probably the stronger opportunity to do well and stay into P2 in the constructors. As mentioned, it's very close to each other. I think because obviously Ferrari's race strategy has always not been the best, and the tire management as well, and just overall driving has never been set up for races. Mercedes does have it set up for races a lot better. So I think Lewis can move more into the points. I think George is challenging for a podium, I think he said as well. So it wouldn't put it past me for him to have a podium. I think it would be quite nice. Who knows, maybe a win as well. That would be a fun, bold prediction for it. But hopefully they can get some good points and keep the P2 in the constructors, which is kind of the main focus for tomorrow's race.
Yeah, I mean, according to George's interviews, he's always apparently missing out on a podium, due to something or other.
He's been ill for 2 weeks as well, apparently. He said that he's running on 3 hours of sleep and barely eating and everything for the last 2 weeks. And apparently that's where he's come very well into his driving style and qualifying, which apparently being sick is where you can get top spots.
Well, slightly lower body weight for not eating properly, all of that stuff. I'm sure if it came down to it, some teams would try and, abuse that, advantage somewhere down the line. But Owain, let's talk about Red Bull then. So Sergio Perez had the lap time deleted and has qualified P9. His lap that was deleted ultimately, I think, was only good enough for P5. But his teammates on pole, as I think everyone was predicting going into this race weekend. What is there to play for now for Red Bull? Like, do they give Perez, an opportunity to try and win? Do they, just let it play out and have Max sail away into the distance?
I mean, the Red Bull, the team, can try and give Perez a win. There's no way Max is going to allow that. We've seen it before, and I guarantee if they tried it, we'd see it again. To be honest with you, I'm usually quite unimpressed by Perez, and I am yet again. Fifth would have been still, we're talking 3 or 4 tenths off of his teammate, and that's been the gap all year. Sometimes it's gone a bit higher, sometimes it's been a bit lower on Perez's good days, but for the most part, it's been quite a poor qualifying. Luckily, everything's done and dusted. He is P2 in the championship. Verstappen's P1, but Verstappen doesn't seem the sort of he's not like Lewis Hamilton, where he seemingly sort of, I guess, checks out once he's won the championship. This guy, the guy's still pushing. We saw them having massive issues in FP3, and Verstappen really not enjoying the car, and then he comes along and just bangs in some lap times. He was the fastest in Q1 straight off the bat. No one could approach his speed in that. It was the same through every other lap that he did. Verstappen's in the place to win this race quite comfortably, I think. And I'll put it this way: Red Bull are about 300 and a bit kilometers away from having built the most dominant car of all time. Like there's no, that's all that they have to do anymore. And I imagine that there'll be something. Well, in fact, I know for a fact that Adrian Newey will be pushing for that because that's always sort of between him and Gordon Murray. That's what they've been trading blows on for quite a while as car designers, and that's all there's really is left to play for at this point.
You mean there is something to play for other than whether George will be wearing a sombrero on tomorrow's race show?
Let's be honest, that's not happening. There's no way. there's no way that Perez wins this race. I'm going to say it right here, right now.
Which means that George will be wearing the sombrero then.
I don't remember which round it went.
So, for the context of everyone listening who hasn't, George Howson and Tom Horrocks have got a bet on as to whether Sergio Perez wins a race this season. It's the final race tomorrow, and obviously Perez hasn't won a race yet since the bet was made. But if Perez does win a race, Tom Horrocks has to wear a sombrero on the show, and only a sombrero on the show. If Perez doesn't win a race, George Howson has to wear a sombrero, and he's hosting tomorrow's show. So tune in tomorrow at 4 p.m. But, we've not finished even going through the rest of the teams yet. So, Sophia, let's talk about McLaren, who, we've obviously mentioned Piastri. I don't know if there is an actual investigation or not, but there has obviously been talk about his impeding of Gasly in Q3. He's starting P3. Lando, was perpendicular to the track at one point, on his final flying lap. I hope I've used the right word there. And ultimately is P5 having not been able to improve. McLaren, have they let Red Bull off the hook today? Because they looked like they had a very fast car and could potentially have been on pole.
I think Norris, that last lap, had not been him going sideways, I think would have taken him as pole. 100%. He had more than one kind of slip up in that fast lap. He was, I believe, green the first sector, then purple the second, and obviously that's when he had to slip up to go yellow in the third one. I mean, what a difference is made as well. Obviously, being both knocked out into Q1 in Las Vegas to now both of them being in the top 5. This is where we've been seeing McLaren kind of be around for these last couple of races. This is kind of where they should be in it, especially obviously because they also are in a constructor battle themselves as well. So that's a key one to have both of those drivers into both the top 5. I think with the Piastri situation, and we were kind of saying this offline as well, I believe he's been sent to the stewards and it's been investigated. It's one of those two. They're kind of using both those terms kind of loosely together. But looking back at some of the clips, Gasly's delta did not change in that kind of instance. So I think Oscar might get out quite lucky without any kind of penalty or any kind of grid penalty, I should say. He might have some other ones for like the unsafe moving or whatever. But I think other than that, he should retain P3, which is a great spot for the McLaren driver to have in his rookie year. This is also one of his most well-known tracks for his career as well. Obviously, he won his title in F2 back in 2021 for it. So I'm expecting a lot for the McLarens. I think both of them in the points is a no-brainer to me, unless there is some miraculous issue, crash or something like that, which I hope doesn't happen, or engine problems. But for both of them, and I do think one of them could get podium. I would love to see maybe Oscar back on the podium for finishing off his rookie year, being the top rookie, obviously, this season. But with McLaren, looking at tire strategies and just seeing how it is, obviously P3, P5, they're behind each other at the start of the race. I believe they're going to be on the inside, which obviously is sometimes the best side to be on. Should see how it goes. But yeah, I think it's been a great qualifying compared to how they were. They did have I believe Piastri had a single lap time deleted for the track limits again, like some of the other drivers that got caught out. But for them, they're back where they want to be. It's a great way to end the season. Podium and points, I think, is on the cards for one, but definitely both for points.
Yeah, absolutely. And Owain, then let's wrap things up. Let's talk about Charles Leclerc, who is starting in P2. Of course, how important is this for the battle for P2 in the constructors? Mercedes and Ferrari separated by just 4 points, with the Mercs on 392, Ferrari on 388. He's done basically everything that he can do today, really, with the exception of putting it on pole. But what does he have to do tomorrow to maximize, the swing-in points?
Win. And hope, and win and hope the Mercedes don't have a good race. To do that, I would say he's actually probably in one of the better positions that we've seen all season. He's starting P2, which a number of times we have seen be an outstanding position to start a race from at Abu Dhabi. Very important. Like, if you can get alongside going into the first corner, just because of the way the track is, you get the inside line for the next long left-hander. And if you're ahead by then, you're off and away. We saw Lewis Hamilton do it in 2021, right at the start of the race, and then we saw it happen. Even before that, we've seen it happen in 2014, I want to say, against Nico Rosberg again with Lewis Hamilton. If you can get a decent start, go over to the right, stop the other driver from coming over to the left, you can dictate the corner. And for some reason at Abu Dhabi, it just seems to be more of a more easier to do it there, for lack of a better term. From that, I don't think it'll be an easy race. And as much as they've sort of had it come to them, the Ferrari hasn't been amazing over race pace. I think it would be a difficult ask, but the option's definitely there. Like, that's still within the realms of possibility at this point, given how close the cars are this season, so or at this point of the season. Sorry. Other than that, Leclerc's just kind of got to hope that he can, I guess, flip the statistic and convert a Max Verstappen pole into a Leclerc win. Obviously, we've seen the opposite of that, but yeah, he's in the best possible position to do it, and I think it's going to rely on that first corner, unfortunately.
Yeah, very familiar with the stats of Leclerc poles converted to Max wins. It's happened a lot this season, but it's also happened a lot just over the last 2 or 3 seasons, really. But before we start actually making some predictions for tomorrow, there is something that all of us want to talk about, and that is pit lane queuing, and everyone's favorite topic of blocking people or trying to make that gap. For me, it seems to be something that has started being a problem since they tried to deal with the issues in qualifying with the the maximum delta time, which doesn't include the pit lane, meaning that drivers have basically just, instead of clogging up the last sector, now just clog up the pit lane exit. We did see in FP2 yesterday, Max, making an overtake in the pit lane, which at the time was allowed. If he did that today, that would have been against the rules. Whether that would have got a penalty or not, previous examples have shown it'd be a no. But what is causing this, Sophia, and why are people so annoyed about the pit lane queuing?
I mean, for the Abu Dhabi one, it's a lot difficult because obviously it's in a tunnel. It's so narrow. And looking back at that video as well, Max was very close to the wall or the drivers. That caused so much issues. I understand some of these circuits have a longer or wider pit lane, so you can kind of do it because obviously sometimes the tires aren't cool enough. Someone's talking on the radio about strategy at the start. So I do understand the need for overtaking potentially, but at the same time, in Abu Dhabi specifically, that is a dangerous feat to have because it is a narrow tunnel with a lot of kind of turns. It's not just a straight pit lane, which we get with a lot of the European circuits. I think they made a good call for that decision. However, because of that, they are now obviously bunching at the start of the pit lane, which also is causing another issue, which is what we saw at the in qualifying, which was when some of the drivers almost cut off. I believe it was a Aston Martin cutting in front of Charles, and obviously behind him was Max, and then you had the 2 Mercedes drivers and everything. So obviously that kind of bunched it up as well, and that could cause some issues as well. I believe doing the Delta cooldown was a good decision, but now they need to start looking at this pit lane because that's going to be a lot where the strategies are coming into now is that's more of an unknown and there's kind of no way of monitoring how it's done. But the call for that happening in the pit lane for Abu Dhabi is a really good safety decision. I'm surprised the FIA came with that decision quickly and effectively as well, which is very, very unlike them to have. But it'll be interesting what the new rules will be for next year as well. I know they've had some meetings about how 2024, 2025, and 2026 seasons are going, sprint races included. But they definitely need to start considering what's happening in the pit lane now because that can cause a lot of safety issues with the drivers, the cars, and even the staff around. Remember, a cameraman almost got hit in the Abu Dhabi in the free practice for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I want to take a sort of a different approach to it, which is that obviously we've made this change for the Delta times as because it was a safety issue, and now and obviously we've made this change this weekend because it's a safety issue to have cars passing each other in what is a very narrow pit lane. What if they come together? What if they get blocked? What if the pit lane gets blocked? Then that becomes an issue for medical cars and safety cars to get out on the track or and what have you. In qualifying, it'd be the medical car, but obviously during a race situation, and sort of the law of unintended consequences has come in. And now we've got drivers going, ridiculously slowly through the pit exit, sitting there and crawling their way through, and then you've got drivers queuing up in the pit lane, which is probably a little bit safer. But then we've got the same problem where, what if that, we had drivers on fast laps while there were still drivers in the pit lane, and that says to me that right, okay, we've got drivers, doing qualifying laps at maximum attack. What if one of those goes off and you need to get a medical car out there? Oh, you can't now because we've now got a very narrow pit lane and there's cars that are as large as the medical car, 5 meters long, 2 meters wide, and you've got to somehow quickly get a safety vehicle there for what could be, say it was Grosjean's crash and we had a similar rule in place and there was and you're trying to so that would happen in a qualifying session. You're trying to get a medical car to it very, very rapidly, and you can't because you're having to have the medical car navigate their way through what would be a very, very congested pit lane. And I'm assuming the drivers and the teams would, bend over backwards to get out of the way in that case or speed up or whatever. Obviously this is a very, very extreme. But at those times, split second, seconds matter. And I think it's just. I don't want to just criticize what they've done. I think it was a good solution to what was happening. But like I say, there's now an unintended consequence, and I think maybe to get around that, we've got to say, okay, you know what, the minimum speed you can go is the pit lane speed limiter. That's the minimum speed you can go, and you can sort out getting out of the pit lane, with the times that you get out the pit lane. Like, what if if you happen to go out the same as another driver, and you end up one after the other, line astern, then I'm sorry, that's just what happened. I assume the teams will try and find a way around that, but currently, I think an 80k an hour or 100k an hour, whatever it ends up being, speed limit for being on the track or being in the pit lane, any part of it would be a good way to start solving this. And maybe the teams would think, you know what, let's space out when we go on track. I think that's right now possibly the best solution we have, but it needs to be sorted because, as I say, that really could be an issue for safety going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another issue that sort of compounded it all together was that queuing up at the end of the pit lane, waiting for the session to start. Maybe that's something that also maybe needs to be addressed as part of it. Because, if you bring in, you can only go at the pit lane speed limiter in the pit lane. How does that then apply to cars starting at, the end of the pit lane? But we can talk about that in the post show of today or even later at another point. Now let's get on to some predictions for this race tomorrow. Now, Sophia, we'll start with you. Who takes your podium? And who's on the top step?
My podium, I think it's a no-brainer given the season he has had. I think Max will convert his pole into a win. Shocker. Um, sorry, George. I think for P2, I will say probably George Russell. I think maybe we'll see. And then for P3, let's go Oscar Piastri. So I think something's going to happen to the Ferrari, and it's just going to end badly. I think still win the points, but that's my podium. Max, George, then Oscar.
Interesting. And, it is quite likely that something might go wrong for the Ferrari. It tends to do as far as, the toss a coin odds go for it. Owain, your podium prediction for tomorrow, please.
I can't not predict Verstappen to get P1, take the win. And then I'm going to go with the McLarens having a really good race. They've shown really good pace today, so I reckon we're going to get Piastri in P2, and then Norris in P3.
So undoubtedly in that situation, we're going to get Norris asking to be put ahead of Oscar, when they are.
Yeah. Say I'm faster. And you know what? This guy's been in front of me all season. I want P2, but I'm predicting that the management over at McLaren are going, no, that's not happening.
Some team management coming from McLaren then, as far as Owain is predicting for tomorrow. But now for some bold predictions then, something a little bit off-piste, a little bit less likely to happen. Let's start with you, Sophia. What's your bold prediction for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix?
Yuki in the points. I mean, I think I wouldn't say he will stay in P6. I think he will be in the points at some aspect. Hopefully, maybe that might help with the constructors battle, but I think that's kind of a slight bold prediction is for him to be in the points. He's not really he's been in and out of the points for the season so far. So nice way to end Frank Toss's career working with AlphaTauri as well for his, I believe it's 200 something appearance in racing or 300 something appearance. So it'll be a nice way to end the season.
Absolutely. That would be a nice way to end the season for, a very long-standing team principal as well, and arguably one of the reasons as to why when they have had success, AlphaTauri have been there. But Owain, your bold prediction, please.
I'll be honest, Sophia, I wish you'd not said Tsunoda in the points, because it's going to make mine look way worse. I'm going to go with Tsunoda to get a podium. That's what I'm going for. So Tsunoda gets a podium. End off.
But that messes up your McLaren podiums.
The bold prediction can supersede it.
I maintain this. I've done this for years now, and everyone takes an issue with it. I'm allowed to have my bold prediction clash with my main prediction.
That's the rule. Your bold prediction can supersede your podium prediction. And I'm going to chuck in a bold prediction, a little bit tongue-in-cheek. With a few laps to go, Sargent is going to collide with a Haas, causing a yellow flag and a safety car that's going to affect the close battles that we've got in the constructors going on tomorrow. A little bit tongue-in-cheek from me, but that's my bold prediction.
Mercedes are going down. What will happen is Mercedes, that they'll be in comfortable second in the constructors, and then both Ferraris will pit, and they'll get softs, and then they'll just go straight past on the final lap.
Imagine that happening.
They were shouting down the radio and everything. We'll have we won't hear it, but we'll see shots of it on the camera on the feed.
No, Mikey, that's not right.
Now, who's the race director for tomorrow? Is it Freitas or Vitic, or do they still have those two as the race directors anymore? We don't really listen. We don't really care about the race directors anymore. Yeah,
stick around for the post show where we
Google it. Stick around for the post show where we Google it. But Owain, is there anything you want to plug before we move on?
I mean, I would love to post my new social channels, but unfortunately, I don't remember what they're called.
I think it's Owain _M
motorsport or something like that. I don't know.
I'm the one that types it half of the time.
I don't. But instead, I will post some other socials. So if you want to keep up to date with the last race of the season and our show plans, assuming there's no red flags or something like that, but you'll find out any updates if there are to our show times at Grid Talk UK, which is where you can find all Grid Talk information on our socials.
Yeah. And Sophia, what do you want to plug?
As mentioned, I co-host Formula Talk, which covers everything that is non-F1, so F2, F3. We just released an episode about Macau's F3 race. We previewed, obviously, F2 is finishing the season this weekend in Abu Dhabi as well. It's going down to the last race with a 16-point difference between Frederick Vesti and Teo Porcher, both Academy drivers. You can listen to us wherever you listen to Grid Talk on all streaming platforms. It is the sister show, and I'll plug again also the social media channels at Grid Talk UK to stay up to date with any new news.
And continuing a trend, I'm going to plug the Grid Talk UK social channels where you can stay up to date with any news about the show, but also, if you want to find anything more from me, I am at Rubes001 on Instagram and Threads, and I'm at Rubes.bluesky. whatever it is on Blue Sky. The platform that isn't Twitter. But Grid Talk is available on YouTube, where most episodes are recorded live, as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to qualifying and the race results. Please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get mics, lights, and better recording equipment. And also make sure you subscribe to the first to know when each new weekly episode is released. We'll be back tomorrow with the F1 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix race show, not qualifying show. This is the qualifying show. George may or may not be wearing a sombrero, so make sure you stick around for that. And we'll also be doing a post show right now. But thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online, and goodbye. And the first thing we'll do then, jumping into the post show, is announce that Piastri keeps P3. Sophia, you obviously said, Gasly wasn't really affected by it. So I'm presuming we are all in agreement that it's the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a close call. It was slightly unsafe, but I mean, that's how it is in racing. It gets close. But there was no change to the delta, and we saw it on the screens multiple times, so it's a good decision to have it, and nice to have both the McLarens in the top 5.
Yeah, and we will confirm, in fact, that Niels Wittich is the race director. Just whilst we're making it aware of, some later show shenanigans. Whilst I get on with looking through some comments, because we've had quite a few people in the chat today. It's great to see, so many people around. Nice to see that even with the dominance that people don't care about F1 anymore, we're getting into the final race of the season and people are showing up to listen to us talk about F1 for an hour.
Been a great season so far as well. Lots of great memories and great clips as well. Definitely got to do a reel at the end of the season at some point with everybody's bits and pieces for it.
Sorry, I'm moving stuff about and I'm bad at it.
You're moving stuff about. I'm looking through comments.
Right, you know what? I've got a minute. I would like to complain about the FIA website because there's a thing.
It's horrible.
There's a thing taunting me, and it says decision car 2 failing to set a lap time within 107%. And I'm assuming that they're going to let him race, but
because when have they ever actually bothered with the 107% rule? Like,
on occasion,
has anyone ever fallen bad to it?
Yes, numerous times.
It's a handful. I know a lot of them have been gone to the stewards and have to kind of beg and plead and everything to let them race. I can't remember if there's been any, off the top of my head, of any drivers recently who've been said that they cannot race though because of it. I know
since it was brought back in 2010, I want to say. 2010. Like, it's not been something that people have fallen foul of because they've been able to appeal.
Well, you have to be so slow. Like, you have to be. I mean, for a minute and 20-second lap, or a minute and 23-second lap at Abu Dhabi, you have to be something like 5 seconds off the leader, which is ridiculous. And Sargent can at least prove that his lap was going to be within 107% of the leader. He just, went out and cost himself a few milliseconds, but the stewards will understand that.
I don't get it because it's literally like I said about Oscar. It's one of the tracks he knows as well. I understand if it's like a new track, Japan or whatever, but it's literally Abu Dhabi, who has been a staple in F2 and F3 for his career. And again, like obviously some drivers did have track limits. I think he was the only one that had more than one or more than two. I think he had five deleted in total, four deleted. I think there was only one other driver that had more than one also deleted. But like, how can that happen so often in a track that should be more comfortable to you? That's where I don't understand it coming from.
Yeah,
I don't
especially with
either.
how much time they spend in the simulators now as well. They know basically every track without actually driving it.
And testing as well. Like,
He should have set a bank on his first one, to be honest. That's the thing. He got his first one deleted.
Basically, don't abuse track limits and you won't have to worry as much ultimately. But yeah, I found a comment that I think might be a good talking point. And it sort of relates to this fight, obviously, at the bottom, which Williams are involved in, even if they are almost a race win ahead of Haas. From Charles, 4 points might as well be 400, unfortunately. And like I kind of alluded to this on the show, like the points that the teams in that bottom four of the constructors need to actually score are the points that they don't usually tend to be fighting for themselves. Did either of you want to talk about this bottom four fight that didn't get a chance to during the show?
most of the points were by luck. I'll say that a lot of it was by luck and by the disappointment of other drivers. And 4 points as well. I mentioned it before. That's literally a quarter or a third of what they've done this whole season. So to get in one race, it will be a major fluke, and it could happen. Anything could happen. Again, it's Abu Dhabi, but it's a great battle. But I points when it comes to points, it's gonna be a different story.
Yeah.
I mean, I said it last week. AlphaTauri's points, they've got 21. Most of those came in the last couple of races, I think. From a fluke from Daniel Ricciardo to get a really, good points paying position there. And to overcome Williams, they've got to score a third of the points that they've got already in one race. And, I think I said the 7 points, the 7 points that Williams is ahead of AlphaTauri is, that's 7 points that they've got to outscore Williams by. And I don't even see AlphaTauri scoring 7 points. I mean, there's a lot more of a chance now, but they've still got to go out and score that. And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, with the performances of the teams this season, it doesn't look like they've been able to do it. They've almost been handed a lifeline by the fact that Tsunoda is there in sixth.
Even with all four drivers that they've had for this season, if they were all on track tomorrow, I still wouldn't put it in, the realms of possibility that AlphaTauri are going to get.
Are you saying that if they had literally a fifth of the grid, they still wouldn't average over 1 point something points per driver?
No.
Especially if you got De Vries into it.
Fair enough.
Let's keep him back into Formula E and all that.
Which one's the one that he's just joined? Was that Formula E?
Mahindra Racing, and I think he's doing WEC now as well. I believe he's
that's
doing
the
endurance as well. Yeah,
I saw. Yeah,
and then obviously mixing Alpine for endurance as well.
God, I can't wait. WEC's going to be great next year. I probably shouldn't be saying this, but don't watch Formula One next year. It's going to be really boring. Watch WEC. It's like 20 quid a year. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to plug it. It's like on the FIA web on the
we're in the post show. It doesn't count.
Yeah, well, on the FIA WEC website, it's like £25 a year or something for the pass that gets you access to every single one of their races. There's not quite as much coverage, so you can only watch from FP3. It's usually on a Saturday, so it doesn't clash with the F1, apart from Le Mans. There's now a ridiculous amount of hypercars. We've got Lamborghini, we've got Alpine, we've got at some point Aston Martin will be coming in. We've got Ferrari, all of that. And what's the other thing? Oh, and now that GT3's back, there's actually like an interesting sort of set of shapes at the front of the field, and it's all BOP properly. And and the best part is you get to hear race director Eduardo Freitas, who actually gets to come over the radio and is the sassiest man I have ever heard. I'm still sort of like, if I go back 6 years, there was a time when a Ford GT went off into the gravel, fine, comes out during the race and is like driving like really erratically to try and shake out a load of the gravel, and then and Eduardo Freitas comes over over the radio to the pit lane channel, the whole pit lane channel, and just goes, sorry, it's like team manager of car number 67. Please tell your driver to stop driving erratically. You are spreading gravel all across the track. It's wild. Come watch the WEC. It's brilliant.
That certainly was an advert for it.
You can watch it on any, because I watch it for Eurosport, which I get for free for getting a sports package on Sky as well, and has really good commentary. I've been tuning into it. I quite enjoy it as well. At the same time, I will also plug something else: Formula 2 and Formula 3 and F1 Academy, which is going to be racing alongside the F1 calendar. That's going to have more battles and more interesting. We also have F1 teams being involved in F1 Academy. So again, that comes with Sky or F1 TV or whatever you watch it from. That will be also good seasons to watch for next year.
The real question, Sophia, is, should Formula Academy graduates be going into, the F2, F3?
Yeah.
That's where they should be going, right?
Yeah. Marta Garcia's in FRECA, which those who don't know is Formula 4. It's called Formula Regional something by Alpine. It is the stepping stone. A lot of the FRECA drivers go into F3. Some of them have from FRECA all the way to F2 for next season. That's 2 of those drivers, including the champion. I think it's a big jump for that one, which we have talked about in Formula Talk in a few episodes, but it should be F3. 100% should be F3. But even those seats are quite challenging as well to get into. So I think maybe next season will be the decider. I think because they kind of want to play it safe and have F1 Academy into FRECA, that's still a big jump. Most of them have not raced in that kind of discipline of the cars. I think it's probably a better decision. And also because the chassis are being changed in F2 and F3 for next year. So we even more of a jump from F1 Academy into those seasons as well. So
I'm showing off my limited F2 and F3 knowledge. Like, they're bringing it into the sort of more style of F1 generation cars that we've got now, aren't they?
Yeah, to make it more not a big of a jump. A lot of the drivers who were in the free practices have said how big of a jump it was between what they were currently racing in F2, and even Jake Dennis in FE said how much of a difference it is being in those kind of cars compared to the F1 cars. So it'd be quite interesting. But yeah, plug all the support series and listen to Formula Talk as well, where we'll come back for season 2.
Yeah. And briefly, just before we finish off, a comment from Jared Bradley. Whilst we were talking about, obviously, the issues with the pit lane stuff, they need to go back to unlimited quali and allow cars to start laps if they're on an out lap when the checkered flag comes out, or single car, single lap quali. Do we think that, I personally think that the shootout qualifying that we have is the best format that we've had for qualifying, but as briefly as we can be, should single lap qualifying be a thing that comes back? Is it the solution that we're looking for? But also, do we need to look at an alternative?
Oh, wait.
Sorry, I was completely zoned out. I'm so sorry.
Also, I think maybe they should introduce the IndyCar style. I think that might be making more interesting. Split into 2 groups, fast 12, and then 6. I think might be quite an interesting shakeup for qualifying sessions for it. But to be fair, this form structure I think is a lot better. I think it's just because of people taking advantage of the pit lanes, it's making it more now kind of a question for it.
I mean, let's be honest. It could be worse. It could be like, do you remember the fuel burn era? Where we used to go out in the first half of qualifying, and they come back, and then you get the fuel back and something, and then after that, luckily we got the we got this sort of qualifying format, which is pretty good. But like you say, I think it's teams abusing stuff. That's really what's happening. I think if they were forced to sort of, they've just been forced to sort of pick a sorry, if we just forced them to pick a time to go out and they couldn't slow down or anything, apart from a technical issue or to avoid incident or something like that, then we'd probably have a lot better off. You know what? Maybe with this many races on the calendar, we can instead draw lots. Like where everyone gets at some point, someone gets to start first, and at some point you have to start last. Over the season, and it gradually evens itself out, except for at Monaco, if you're going to run 21 races. And I can't think of anywhere else where you'd have to do it. So maybe there's just another one where we just don't do it and we just do this format instead. I don't know. First race of the
everyone rolls a D20, and wherever you roll, you start.
I'd like that. Roll a D20, no duplicates. That'd be sick.
Why not? Why not? Absolutely. And yeah, so on that note, we shall call it there. Thank you very much, everyone who joined in the live chat. It was really good. Just engagement coming through whilst we were live. Like I say, we'll be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. for our review of the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix for 2023, provided that the session isn't significantly delayed. But on that note, thank you, Owain and Sophia, for joining me. Thank you, Aidan, for your production. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And we shall see you tomorrow. Bye.